This is my true story. I was a father who gave everything to his only daughter. I built her life from the ground up, paid her tuition, funded her business, and gave her the roof over her head. I thought one day she'd look at me with pride, but instead, she looked at me like a burden. One evening, she said, "Stop calling me, Father. You call me so much, I get disturbed." Those words broke something deep inside me, but I wasn't weak. I still had one thing left: power. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is, and please subscribe so my story can reach more people. I worked every single day for that girl. From the moment she took her first breath, I made a promise that she would never go through what I did. I worked in factories, in warehouses, in the cold, in the heat, wherever they'd take me. My hands were never clean, my back never rested. But my heart was proud. Every dollar I earned went to her future. School fees, clothes, food, everything. I remember skipping lunch sometimes just so she could have new shoes for class. When she was little, she'd run up to me at the gate shouting, "Daddy!" and wrap her arms around my legs. That word used to be my whole world. I didn't have much growing up. My father died when I was 12, and I learned early that love wasn't something handed out. You had to build it with effort. So that's what I did. I built mine through my daughter. I carried her on my shoulders to school, waited outside in the rain when she forgot her umbrella, and saved coins in an old jar so she could go on every school trip. I didn't know what happiness was until I saw her smile. I thought I was doing everything right, being the kind of father I never had. When she grew older, I taught her how to work, how to respect people, how to be honest, how to keep her word. We used to fix broken furniture together in the garage. I'd hand her the tools and she'd watch every move I made. I told her, "One day you'll build something better than this." She used to nod and say, "I'll make you proud, Dad." And I believed her. Every time she said that, I felt my body get lighter, my pain go quiet. When she turned 18, I bought her her first laptop. It wasn't top of the line, but it was new. I told her, "Now you can email me anytime." She smiled and said she would. Back then, that laptop was a symbol. I thought it meant we'd always stay connected. Years later, that same device became the wall between us. She did well in college. I paid for every class, every book, every apartment. When she graduated, I stood in the crowd clapping until my hands hurt. She didn't even look my way that day. But I didn't mind. I thought she was nervous, caught up in the moment. I took a picture from far away just to remind myself that it was all worth it. When she started her business, I was the first person she called. "Dad, I need help with the paperwork," she said. I didn't even hesitate. I signed whatever she needed. I co-signed the bank loan that got her company started. I put my name and my reputation on every document. I didn't do it for money. I did it because she was my daughter. Because that's what fathers do. They open doors even when they're tired of knocking on their own. The business grew fast. She became busy, successful, surrounded by people who clapped for her. I used to sit at home and watch her on TV interviews talking about how she built it from scratch. She never mentioned my name. Not once. Still, I didn't complain. I told myself that maybe that's what success does. It makes people forget where they came from. I thought, she's young. She'll remember later. But later never came. When I called her, she'd answer less often. When I visited her office, the receptionist would say, "She's in a meeting." She stopped coming home for holidays, stopped checking on me after my doctor visits. I used to wait by the window every evening just hoping she'd call to say, "How are you, Dad?" That call never came. I kept quiet through all of it because I didn't want to be a burden. I told myself that love doesn't need to be returned, that it's enough to give it. But deep down, I started to feel something break. It wasn't anger, it was sadness. The kind that doesn't shout, it just sits quietly in your chest. I never thought the same girl who once called me daddy with pride would one day say it like an insult. I didn't know then that love without respect is a slow kind of death. And I was already dying long before she told me to stop calling her. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind of evening that used to be filled with laughter years ago when she'd come home shouting my name and I'd pretend to be asleep on the couch just to hear her giggle as she tried to wake me up. But that was long gone. Now it was just me, sitting alone in my small living room in Sacramento, staring at my phone, thinking whether I should call her again. I told myself maybe she was busy, maybe she was tired, maybe she'd forgotten to call. But that's what fathers always do. We make excuses for the same children who stopped making time for us. I had been sick that week. The medicine made me dizzy, and the silence in the house felt heavier than usual. So I picked up the phone and dialed her number. It was muscle memory by then. I had her number memorized, even though I wasn't sure she'd answer. After 4 rings, she did. For a second, I felt relief. I smiled and said, "Sweetheart, it's me." But before I could say another word, I heard her sigh. Not the sigh of someone tired, but of someone annoyed. "What is it now?" she said flatly. Her tone hit me like a cold wind. I froze for a second, confused, thinking maybe she was just stressed. I said, "Just checking on you, honey. Haven't heard from you in a while." There was silence for a moment. Then, with a sharpness I'd never heard before, she said, "You don't have to keep calling me all the time. I'm busy. Stop calling me, old man." That line echoed in my head. Old man. Not dad, not even father, just old man. Like I was some stranger disturbing her peace. I tried to laugh, hoping she'd realize how harsh that sounded. I said, all right, but you'll always be my girl, no matter how." She cut me off before I could finish. "And stop calling me father," she said. The room fell silent. The air felt heavy. My hand froze mid-air, holding the phone against my ear. I thought I misheard her, that maybe it was a bad connection. But she repeated it, slower this time, each word colder than the last. "Stop calling me father." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My heart didn't break like glass. It cracked like wood, slow and deep. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just sat there listening to the sound of my own breathing. She didn't hang up right away. She stayed on the line for a few seconds, maybe expecting me to say something. But I didn't. When she realized I had nothing left to say, she muttered something under her breath and disconnected. The phone screen went dark. I just stared at it, waiting for it to light up again, thinking maybe she'd call back and say, "I didn't mean that, Dad." But the light never came. The silence in that room was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I remember looking at the photo on the wall, her as a child sitting on my shoulders, her small hands gripping my head, both of us laughing. I reached out and touched the frame. It felt colder than the phone, still warm in my hand. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the streetlights flicker, wondering how a single sentence could erase decades of love. I thought of every night I stayed awake working overtime to pay her tuition, every meal I skipped so she could eat better, every dream I gave up so she could chase her own. I thought of how proud I was the day she called me Daddy for the first time. That one word used to mean everything to me. Now it was gone, ripped out of my life like it never belonged there. When morning came, I didn't feel angry. I felt empty, like the world had turned gray. People think betrayal comes with fire, with shouting and tears, but it doesn't. It comes with quiet words and an empty chair. I didn't tell anyone what she said, not my neighbors, not my friends. I didn't want pity. I just wanted peace. But deep inside, I knew something had changed forever. She didn't just reject me as a father that night. She erased me from the story I had spent my whole life writing. And I didn't know it then, but that silence, the silence that followed those words, would become the start of everything that came next. The days after that call felt longer than any I'd ever lived. Every hour moved slow, like time itself didn't want to move forward. I stopped calling her, not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't bear to hear that voice again, the one that made me feel like I didn't belong anymore. I'd sit in my chair by the window, staring at the street, pretending I was waiting for someone, but I wasn't. I was just trying to fill the silence. The phone stayed on the table beside me, fully charged, untouched. For the first time in years, it didn't ring. Word spreads fast in small towns. People started to notice that my daughter no longer visited. At the grocery store, one of my old friends asked, "Haven't seen your girl in a while. She must be busy with her company, huh?" I just smiled and nodded. I couldn't tell them the truth, that my daughter wasn't busy. She was gone. That she didn't just move away. She moved on. And I wasn't part of the picture anymore. Every question, every well-meaning comment felt like a knife twisted slow. Then came the whispers. Small towns have a way of making silence louder. I overheard two women at the coffee shop say, "You know, she doesn't even talk to her father anymore. The old man's all alone now." They didn't say it to hurt me, but it hurt all the same. I drank my coffee in silence, finished it to the last drop, and walked out before they could notice the shake in my hands. At night, I'd look through old photos, birthdays, school events, the day she opened her company. In every picture, I was there, behind her, beside her, always smiling. I realized I had spent my whole life standing behind her, making sure she never fell. And now, when I stumbled, there was no one to reach back for me. The irony was cruel, but it was real. Her husband stopped answering my messages too. I used to send him small texts asking how they were doing, if they needed anything. He'd reply politely before a few words, nothing more. But after that night, he stopped completely. I guess he heard what she said, or maybe he just decided it was easier to forget me too. Either way, the silence grew heavier. Sometimes I'd pass by her office building on my way to the bank. I'd see her through the glass, laughing with clients, surrounded by people who clapped for her. She looked confident, happy, like she had everything. And I'd wonder if she ever thought about the man standing outside, the one who built the foundation under those shiny floors. I doubt she did. Success has a way of blinding people to the ground they're standing on. I didn't hate her. That's what surprised me most. I thought I would, but I didn't. Hate takes energy, and I didn't have much left to give. Instead, I just felt smaller every day, like the world had quietly erased me without making a sound. My meals got smaller, my walks got shorter, my voice quieter. The few people who still called me Sir at the market were the only ones who reminded me I existed. One afternoon, I sat outside watching the sun go down behind the hills. A neighbor walked by and said, "You should be proud. Your daughter's company is on the news again." I smiled weakly and said, "Yes, she's doing well." Then I went inside and closed the door before the tears could fall. I didn't want anyone to see. The shame of being forgotten is different from any other pain. It doesn't shout, it just lingers, sitting heavy in your chest, reminding you of what you lost every time the phone doesn't ring. But as the days went by, the sadness started to turn into something else. Not anger, not revenge. Clarity. I started to remember things I had forgotten. Documents, signatures, papers with my name still on them. She might have stopped calling me father, but legally, my name was still tied to everything she owned. Her company, her assets, her success. All of it started with my approval, my co-signature, my trust. And the more I thought about it, the more that silence inside me began to harden. I wasn't powerless. I had just forgotten how much power I actually held. She may have taken my name out of her heart, but she hadn't taken it off her papers. And that, I realized, was the biggest mistake of her life. If you're watching this, take a second to hit that like button. It helps more people hear stories like this one. And subscribe if you haven't already, because what comes next, you won't want to miss. It started as a quiet thought, the kind that sneaks into your mind and doesn't leave. I was sitting at the kitchen table one morning, staring at my old folder of documents. It had been there for years, a worn brown file that held the story of everything I'd built. I used to keep it just for memories, never realizing it would one day become my weapon. When my daughter first started her business, she had begged me to help her. I still remember that day clearly. She came to me with big dreams and even bigger plans. Her voice was full of confidence, but her wallet was empty. "Dad," she said, "I just need your signature to get started." I didn't hesitate. I went with her to the bank, signed the loan papers, co-signed the contracts, and even let her register the business under both our names. At first, she said it was just a formality, that once things got running, she'd transfer everything. I trusted her. I thought trust was the same as love. The folder contained every piece of that trust, the proof that my name still stood behind her success. Without my guarantees, that business wouldn't have existed. The bank had only approved the startup loan because of my property, my assets, and my name. Back then, it felt good to help her. I was proud when people said, "You raised a smart girl." But over time, she started acting like the company was all hers. She changed the signage, dropped my name from everything public, and told people she built it from scratch. I didn't argue. Let her have the spotlight, I thought. What matters to me is seeing her succeed. But now, looking at those papers again, I realized the spotlight wasn't hers alone. The stage she stood on still belonged to me. The documents were all there, original property titles, share agreements, the loan application with my name signed neatly next to hers. I kept flipping through each page, and with every signature, I remembered every sacrifice that came with it. I could still see the small coffee stain on one paper from the day I had come straight from work to meet the banker. I didn't even change my shirt before signing. My name, my fingerprints, my sweat. Everything about that business carried a part of me, and she had forgotten that. I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time in weeks. Not out of happiness, but realization. My daughter thought she had moved past me, that I was just an old man clinging to the past. But she forgot something important. The foundation never forgets the builder. No matter how tall the building gets, the ground it stands on still owns it. And I was the ground. That afternoon, I went to my small safety deposit box at the local credit union. Inside was another folder: insurance, savings, a few joint accounts that still had her name next to mine. She probably hadn't even thought about them in years. She was too busy chasing profits, too busy pretending I didn't exist. I ran my fingers over the metal edge of the box and thought, if she can erase me from her heart, I can erase her from her success. Not out of anger, but out of balance. I didn't tell anyone about what I found, not my neighbors, not even Mr. Harrison, my old attorney. Not yet. I wanted to make sure every move was careful, legal, clean. I spent the evening going over every line, every term, every fine print she never bothered to read. She was good with numbers, but not with details. She thought signing a few documents meant control. She didn't realize that power isn't in ownership. It's in the signature that started it all. By the time night fell, I had already decided what needed to be done. She had built her business with my name, and now she would learn what happens when that name is taken back. She had forgotten that respect is the real currency, and without it, even an empire becomes worthless. As I put the folder back in its place, I said softly to myself, she told me to stop calling her father. That's fine. But when the world stops calling her successful, maybe she'll remember who gave her that name in the first place. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't dream of sadness or silence. I dreamed of justice. The quiet kind that doesn't shout or hurt, but simply restores what was lost. I knew exactly what I had to do next, and it would only take one call. That night the house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that almost hums in your ears. The folder sat in front of me on the kitchen table, the same table where I had once helped my daughter with her algebra homework. The lamp above flickered, throwing long shadows across the papers. My dinner was untouched. I wasn't hungry. I just stared at the documents, the signatures, the stamps. My name beside hers. The proof of everything I gave her. All those years of work, sweat, and trust, printed neatly in black ink. I ran my fingers over my own name. It felt like a reminder and a warning all at once. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger fades. What I felt was something colder. Resolve. That was the night I decided enough was enough. I couldn't change what she said to me. I couldn't make her love me again or respect me. But I could remind her who I was. Not through words, not through emotion, but through the very thing she valued most. Control. The same control she thought she had over her success. I sat there thinking about everything that led to this point. The endless sacrifices, the years of struggle, the nights I stayed up worrying about bills just to make sure she'd have an easier life. I thought about how proud I was when she bought her first condo, when she moved into her big office, when she stopped needing me. But that pride had blinded me. It made me forget that people who forget where they came from eventually fall. And sometimes, it's the ground they left behind that reminds them how hard the fall can be. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Each second felt like a question. Will you keep letting her disrespect you? Or will you remind her what you built? I looked out the window. The streetlights glowed faintly against the dark road. Somewhere out there, my daughter was probably having dinner in her big house, laughing, feeling safe, believing the world was under her control. She didn't know that the same man she told to stop calling her father was about to make one call that would change everything she owned. I stood up and walked to the drawer where I kept my contact book. I'm old-fashioned. I still keep numbers written down. I flipped through the worn pages until I found the one I needed. Mr. Harrison, my attorney. I hadn't spoken to him in months, but I knew he'd still answer. I placed my finger over his name for a moment, thinking about what this would mean. This wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness. The kind of fairness that only time can teach. Before calling, I looked around my small kitchen, the faded wallpaper, the old chair, the quiet space. Everything around me was real, earned, honest. My daughter's world, on the other hand, was built on borrowed hands. Mine. She had forgotten that, and now she'd remember. I took a deep breath and dialed the number. It rang once, twice. Then a calm voice answered. Mr. Harrison speaking. I didn't waste time. It's me, I said. I'm ready to withdraw my name from all my daughter's company documents, every guarantee, every signature. I don't want to be connected anymore. There was a pause. Then he said carefully, You're sure about this? I said, I've never been more sure in my life. He promised to start the paperwork first thing in the morning. It would be clean, legal, final. Once done, the contracts would collapse, the loans would be recalled, the investors would lose confidence. Everything my daughter thought was unshakable would start to crumble, quietly, piece by piece, without a single argument or raised voice. When I hung up, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel victory. I just felt peace. The kind that comes when you stop waiting for people to change and start taking control of what's yours. I walked to the window again and looked at the night sky. The moonlight hit the street where I used to walk her to kindergarten. Back then, she'd hold my hand tightly, afraid of the dark. Now, she was the one who needed to find her way through it. That night, I turned off the light, went to bed, and slept without dreams. My mind was clear. My heart was steady. I knew what I had done would not destroy her. It would teach her. Because sometimes the only way to make someone remember their roots is to shake the tree they grew from. If this story is hitting you deep, do me a favor and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that share button. Let's remind people what respect really means. The next morning began like any other, but I could feel something different in the air. I woke up early, made myself a black coffee, and sat by the window. The street was quiet, the way it always is before something big happens. I didn't rush. I didn't second-guess myself. The call to my attorney the night before had already set everything in motion. By the time the sun fully rose, the process had started. My name, the same name that once gave my daughter's business its strength, was being removed from every file, every contract, every account that carried my signature. Around mid-morning, my phone rang. It was Mr. Harrison. His voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the undertone of movement behind it. Papers being stamped, people talking. It's done, he said. The withdrawals are official. The bank has been notified. They've started freezing the lines tied to your guarantee. I thanked him quietly. This will take effect fast, he added. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. That's all right, I said. She wanted distance. Now she'll have it. By noon, it had begun. Contracts started falling apart one by one. The investors, the ones who only trusted the company because of my name, began pulling out. The loan officers started calling, asking questions she couldn't answer. Her credit line was suddenly cut short. The insurance tied to my property was voided, and the confidence behind her company vanished. The collapse didn't happen with explosions or chaos. It happened with quiet phone calls and formal notices. One signature undone. Years of arrogance. Later that day, my neighbor came by to drop off groceries. While I signed the receipt, I saw her scrolling on her phone. "You've seen this?" she asked. "There's some issue with your daughter's business. It's all over the local news." I just smiled faintly. "No, I hadn't seen it," I said. Inside, I felt something shift. Not joy, not spite. Just closure. Meanwhile, miles away, my daughter's office was in panic. She must have been sitting behind her desk, confused at first, then furious. The calls would have started pouring in from banks, clients, investors, all demanding answers. She would have looked through her files trying to find out what went wrong. And then she would have seen it. Cosigner withdrawn. Legal guarantor removed. My name was gone. The foundation was gone. The man who had once built her success had just taken his name back. I imagined the scene clearly. Papers scattered, voices raised, her assistant pacing outside the door, her husband calling, worried, her yelling into the phone, saying, "What do you mean the contracts are void?" All the while, the same phone she once told me to stop calling was now her worst enemy, ringing non-stop with bad news. The same line that carried her arrogance now carried her downfall. By the evening, Mr. Harrison called again. "You should know," he said. "Your daughter tried to reach the bank to reverse it, but they told her it's final. Your withdrawal nullifies the agreements. Without your guarantee, everything reverts." I asked, "How long until it's complete?" He replied, "By tomorrow morning, it'll all be public record." After hanging up, I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down. I looked around my small house. Clean, quiet, simple. Everything here was mine. Not because of wealth, but because it was earned. Honestly. My daughter had forgotten the meaning of that. She thought success came from shouting louder, from showing off, from cutting people out once she'd climbed high enough. But she never understood that if you burn the hands that lifted you, the fall hurts more than the climb ever did. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there as the sky darkened and the first bit of rain tapped the window. I thought about the night she told me, "Stop calling me, Father." I wondered if she remembered it now, if she realized that sometimes a single sentence can rewrite everything. She told me to stop calling. I did. I made one call instead, the last one I'd ever need to make. That night, I slept peacefully. The storm had already started for her, but for me, the silence was finally calm. I had done nothing illegal, nothing cruel. I had simply reminded her of the truth, that respect and success share the same foundation, and once it's gone, everything above it falls. By the next morning, the entire town knew something was wrong. It started with whispers, short messages, quiet phone calls, headlines that didn't make sense at first. Local business empire collapses overnight. Investors pull out after guarantee withdrawal. Her name was everywhere, and not in the way she was used to. I woke up early, as I always did, made myself tea and turned on the radio. The announcer's voice was calm, almost detached, but every word hit like a hammer. Sources confirmed the company's assets have been frozen following legal withdrawal by the cosigner. That was me. They didn't say my name, but they didn't have to. I sat there in silence, stirring my tea, and thought, she must be reading this too. By noon, the first knock came. It was her, my daughter. The same woman who told me to stop calling her father now stood on my doorstep, hair messy, shirt wrinkled, eyes swollen. Her car was parked halfway on the sidewalk like she couldn't even think straight. I opened the door. but didn't step aside. She looked at me for a moment, breathing heavy. "Dad," she said, voice trembling. It was the first time she'd said that word in months. I didn't reply. I just stared at her. Not with anger, but with the same calm she once mistook for weakness. She ran her hand through her hair, pacing on the porch. "Something's wrong," she said. "The banks are calling. The investors are gone. The company's shut down. They're saying your name, that you—" She stopped mid-sentence. Her voice cracked, and I could see it. The panic, the realization, the fear. She understood. She knew. The man she told to stop calling had made one call that erased her empire. "Why would you do this?" she shouted suddenly, her voice breaking through the quiet morning. The neighbor's curtains moved slightly. I stayed calm. "You wanted distance," I said softly. "I just gave you what you asked for." She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "Dad, please." That word again. Dad. It sounded different now. Not proud, not careless, but desperate. She took a step closer. "You can fix this, right? You can call them, tell them to reinstate it." Her voice started shaking. "Please, they're going to take everything." I looked at her and said nothing. She kept talking, rambling, pleading. "We have bills, Dad. The house, the car, the employees, they're all calling me. They think I cheated them. Please, I need your help." She reached for my arm, but I pulled away. "You said not to call you father," I said. "So why are you calling me now?" Her face fell. She froze like a child caught lying. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of church bells from down the street. I could see it. The regret starting to sink in. The panic had turned into shame. She knew what I was saying was true. She had treated me like I was nothing. But now, the man she ignored was the only one who could save her. She looked at the ground, shaking her head. "I didn't mean it," she said quietly. "I was angry. I didn't know what I was saying." I folded my arms and said, "You knew exactly what you were saying. You just never thought it would cost you anything." She broke down then. Her voice cracked, her hands trembled, and she started crying. Not out of pain, but out of realization. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was stupid. I thought I didn't need you." Her words came out between sobs. "Please, Dad, I'll fix everything. I'll do anything." She dropped to her knees on the porch. The neighbors were watching now, their blinds slightly open. I didn't care. I let her stay there. Because sometimes lessons aren't taught through lectures. They're taught through loss. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I just stood there, silent. She begged for a long time before finally whispering, "Please forgive me." I didn't answer. I just said, "Get up. Go home. Think about what respect costs, because you just paid for it." As she walked away, shoulders slumped, I felt no hate, no satisfaction, just peace. She had finally learned what pride couldn't teach her, that no success built on disrespect can last. That night I sat alone again, looking at the same phone she once told me to stop using. It was quiet now. No calls, no noise, just silence. But this time, that silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. The next day, I thought it was over. I thought she would take the loss, go quiet, and disappear for a while, like proud people do when they fall. But by evening, I heard another knock, softer this time. I didn't open it right away. I waited. The knock came again, steady, hesitant. When I opened the door, there she was, sitting on the porch steps like a lost child. Her blazer was gone, replaced by a plain sweater, her face pale, her eyes swollen red. She looked smaller, weaker, like someone who had been stripped of everything but guilt. When she saw me, she stood up quickly, her hands shaking. "Dad?" she said again, voice breaking before the word even finished. She didn't wait for an invitation. She walked straight in and dropped to her knees in the middle of my small living room. Her voice came out cracked, desperate. "Please, Dad. Please. I made a mistake." She started crying openly. Not the kind of crying people do for sympathy, but the kind that comes from somewhere deep, the kind that shakes your whole body. Her tears hit the floor, one after another. I didn't move to help her. I just stood there watching. The same woman who once told me to stop calling her father, now crying for me to answer to that word again. "I was wrong," she said between breaths. "I thought I didn't need anyone. I thought I was strong." She looked up at me, eyes full of shame. "But you were right, Dad. Everything I had, it was because of you." Her voice cracked again. "I treated you like nothing, and now I have nothing." I didn't respond right away. I wanted her to sit in that silence, the same silence I had lived with for months. I wanted her to understand that respect isn't given by chance. It's built, word by word, action by action. And when you break it, it doesn't come back easy. She kept talking, begging, explaining. "The bank called. They said without your signature, the loans are gone. The investors pulled out. They want to take the office, the cars, everything." Her voice trembled. "Please, Dad, you can fix it. I know you can. You always could." She crawled closer, reaching for my hand, but I stepped back. She froze, her hand hanging midair. "You told me to stop calling you father," I said quietly. "So why are you calling me now?" The question hung between us like a heavy weight. She lowered her head again. "Because I forgot who you were," she whispered. "And I forgot who I was because of it." I could feel her pain, but I didn't rush to comfort her. This wasn't about revenge. It was about realization. I needed her to remember that fathers are not burdens. They are foundations. When you kick the foundation, the whole house falls. And she was standing in the wreckage of her own doing. She pressed her palms together like praying. "Please, Dad, I'll do anything. I'll start over. I'll take care of you. Just fix this. Please." Her voice broke completely then, and she lowered her head until it almost touched the ground. For a long time, all I could hear was her quiet sobbing and the ticking of the old clock on my wall. Finally, I took a slow breath and said, "I don't want your business. I don't want your money. I just wanted your respect. You had one job, to remember who helped you rise." She looked up, tears streaking down her face. "I do now," she said. "I swear I do." I nodded, but I didn't promise anything. Some lessons aren't supposed to end in comfort. They're supposed to stay raw, so they're never forgotten. I reached out and placed my hand on her shoulder, not as a gesture of forgiveness, but of closure. "You'll rebuild," I said softly. "But this time, do it the right way. Earn it. Don't take shortcuts through people's hearts." She nodded, crying harder. I walked to the door and opened it. "Go home," I said. "Rest. Tomorrow's a new day." She stood slowly, wiped her face, and looked at me like a woman seeing her father for the first time again. Then she walked out without another word. As I closed the door, I felt something shift inside me. Not pride, not revenge. Peace. The kind that comes when justice and love finally meet halfway. She had begged for forgiveness, and I had given her something better. The chance to become a woman worth forgiving. After that night, everything felt different. Not just for her, for me too. I didn't feel like the same quiet father sitting by the phone waiting for a daughter who never called. Something had shifted deep inside. For the first time in years, I felt balanced. Not powerful, not proud, just even. The world had a way of setting things right when you finally stopped protecting the wrong people from consequences. In the days that followed, my daughter tried to fix things. She called the banks, the investors, even the attorney, but the system had already done its work. Every door she opened led to another closed one. Every person she called had already moved on. The company that once made her untouchable was now silent. No meetings, no clients, no transactions. The sign that once bore her name now looked meaningless. That's when she started to understand what I had tried to teach her whole life, that money without respect doesn't last. She visited again after a few days. She didn't come in shouting this time. She walked in quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed me one and sat across the table. Her hands still shook, but her voice was calm. "I lost everything," she said. I looked at her and replied, "No, you just found something else." She frowned. "What's that?" I said, "Humility." We sat in silence for a while. She stared at the steam rising from her coffee, and I watched her. Really watched her. For the first time in years, she wasn't pretending to be strong. She wasn't showing off or talking big. She was just a woman facing the truth of her own actions. It was strange how losing everything had finally brought her back to herself. She started talking about rebuilding, not the company, herself. "I don't want the business anymore," she said. "I want to earn what's mine this time." I nodded. That was all I needed to hear. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about learning. And now, finally, she was ready to learn. Before we continue, if this story is teaching you something, hit that subscribe button. These lessons are too important to miss. Let's keep going. Over the next few weeks, I watched her change. She stopped dressing like a woman trying to impress the world. She started showing up at the community center, helping out, fixing things for free. She'd visit me every weekend, clean the yard, cook dinner, and sit with me like she used to when she was young. The arrogance was gone. The distance was gone. In its place was something stronger. Understanding. One evening, as we sat watching the sunset, she said, "Dad, I don't know how to repay you." I told her the truth. "You already did." She looked confused. I smiled. "You learned the lesson. That's enough." She didn't say anything, but I saw it in her eyes. She finally got it. Respect, responsibility, gratitude. The things I tried to teach her when she was a girl. Things that success had buried under ego. The same lesson that life eventually dug back out with its own hard hands. She had learned what no book or business deal could teach. That the hands that raised you can also let you fall if you forget their worth. She started from scratch after that, found a small job, rented a small apartment. She called me often, not out of habit, but out of choice. Sometimes just to ask how I was. Sometimes to tell me about her day. I never asked about the money or the company. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered was that I had my daughter back. Not the businesswoman, not the prideful woman, but the girl I once raised. People in town still whispered about what happened. They called me ruthless, cold. They said I destroyed my daughter's future. But I didn't destroy it. I saved it. Because sometimes love doesn't mean giving more. Sometimes it means taking away what's killing a person slowly. Their arrogance, their blindness, their pride. I took that from her. And in doing so, I gave her herself back. She told me once, "Dad, I finally understand why you did it." I nodded and said, "Good." Because that was the point. The lesson wasn't about power. It was about respect. The one thing that keeps families strong and hearts humble. She learned it the hard way, but she learned it. And that's all a father can hope for. It's strange how life comes full circle. The same daughter who once told me to stop calling her father now calls me every morning just to say good morning. The same woman who once laughed at my advice now asks for it before making a move. The same voice that once spoke with pride now speaks with gratitude. It didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen easily. But it happened. Sometimes people need to lose everything to finally see what matters. My daughter had to lose her company, her house, her image, and her arrogance to finally find something worth keeping. Respect. Now, when she visits, she doesn't drive up in a fancy car or wear those sharp blazers that once made her look untouchable. She comes in simple clothes, carrying groceries, asking if I need anything fixed around the house. I watch her quietly as she works, hammering a nail, cleaning the yard, and I see the girl I raised. Not the woman success had changed, but the one humility brought back. There's peace in that. Not victory, not satisfaction, just quiet peace. People still talk about what I did. Some say I was cruel, that I went too far. Others say I was brave. But I don't think it was either. It was necessary. Fathers are expected to give endlessly, but giving without boundaries turns love into weakness. The day she told me to stop calling her father, something inside me broke. But that break also opened my eyes. I realized I had spent my life protecting her from every consequence, every failure, every pain, every lesson. I shielded her, and because of that, she grew up thinking life would always bend for her. It took one call to remind her that even love has limits. She never knew that I cried that night after making that call. Not because I was proud of what I did, but because I knew it would hurt her. No parent wants to see their child fall. But sometimes you have to let them hit the ground so they understand why you told them to walk carefully. I didn't ruin her. I rebuilt her. I took away the illusion of power so she could find real strength. Months have passed now. She's working a normal job, earning her own way. It's not glamorous, but she's happy. She visits every weekend, and we sit on the porch talking about small things. The weather, the garden, the people in town. She tells me about the co-workers who respect her, not because of her last name or her company, but because she shows up, works hard, and stays humble. That's all I ever wanted for her. One evening, as the sun went down, she said, "Dad, you know that call you made? It saved me." I looked at her and smiled. "I know," I said. "It saved me, too." Because it did. It freed me from the quiet pain of being forgotten. It reminded me that even in old age, a father's voice still matters. It may shake, it may soften, but when spoken with purpose, it can still change lives. Now, when I pick up my phone and see her name on the screen, I still pause for a second before answering. Not out of bitterness, just reflection. Every ring reminds me of that night, of those words, of how far we both came from them. Stop calling me father. Those 4 words built a wall between us. But one call tore that wall down brick by brick until only truth remained. She learned her lesson. I learned mine. She learned that success means nothing if it costs your family. I learned that love means nothing if it doesn't have self-respect. We both found balance in the wreckage. I don't know how many years I have left, but I know this. When I'm gone, she'll remember me not as the man who gave her money, but as the man who gave her a lesson that money could never buy. Final thought. She told me to stop calling her father, so I made one call that reminded her who I truly was. Not her burden, not her weakness. Her father.